Not the kind of magic people talk about lightly, but the quiet, unsettling kind, the moment you realize that most of the suffering in your life hasn't come from what actually happened, but from what you were afraid might happen, from the endless conversations you rehearsed in your head, from the future you lived through 1,000 times without ever arriving there, from the pressure of trying to control outcomes that were never truly yours to command. If you've ever felt exhausted not by life itself, but by your own thoughts about life, then this moment, right now, is speaking directly to you. The Stoics understood something most of us are never taught. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we are disturbed not by events, but by our judgments about them. And yet, day after day, we carry worry as if it were our responsibility, as if imagining disaster were preparation, as if tension were proof that we care. But what if worry isn't wisdom at all? What if it's the very thing standing between you and clarity, strength, and peace? What if the moment you stop fighting the future is the moment life begins to meet you halfway? Today isn't about pretending everything is fine. Stoicism never asked us to deny reality. It asked us to meet reality clearly, without panic, without illusion, and without self-betrayal. This is about learning how to place your energy where it actually matters, your character, your choices, your inner discipline, and releasing the rest. Because when you stop trying to control what was never yours, something surprising happens. Your mind steadies, your actions sharpen, and life starts unfolding with far less resistance. If you're here because you want more than temporary motivation, if you're seeking wisdom that strengthens you over time, clarity that outlasts fear, and a philosophy that helps you live well no matter what comes, then consider subscribing, not as a favor to me, but as a commitment to yourself, a quiet decision to walk the Stoic path of self-mastery, truth, and inner freedom. I want to be completely honest with you before we begin. There are moments in life when nothing feels obviously wrong, yet something inside you is constantly tense. Your body is here, but your mind is always somewhere else, running ahead, predicting, bracing, preparing. You wake up already tired, not because the day has started, but because your thoughts never really stopped. And slowly, without realizing it, worry becomes the background noise of your life. Not loud enough to panic you, but persistent enough to drain you. The Stoics noticed this long before modern psychology put words to it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. What you think about repeatedly does not stay abstract. It settles into you. It shapes how you breathe, how you stand, how you speak, how you move through the world. Over time, worry stops feeling like something you do and starts feeling like who you are. And that is where suffering quietly deepens. Most people believe worry is a sign of intelligence or responsibility. They think that if they stop worrying, something bad will happen, as if anxiety is holding the universe together. But worry has never prevented pain. It has only made pain arrive earlier, linger longer, and feel heavier than it needed to. Seneca once warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and he wasn't speaking poetically. He was describing a mental habit that steals peace from the present in exchange for an illusion of control. You don't wake up one day and decide to become a worrier. It happens gradually. A small concern here, a habit of overthinking there, a moment where fear feels safer than trust. And slowly the mind learns a pattern. Scan for danger, rehearse loss, prepare for disappointment. The brain becomes skilled at it, the same way hands become skilled at a craft practiced every day. Carl Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Worry works exactly like that. It operates beneath awareness, quietly shaping decisions, reactions, and self-image. At some point, you may notice something unsettling. Even when things are going well, you don't feel calm. There is always a sense that something is about to go wrong. You wait for the other shoe to drop. You hold joy carefully, as if it might break. This is not intuition. This is a nervous system that has been trained to stay on guard. The Stoics would say this is the cost of giving your inner peace to external outcomes. Epictetus taught that some things are within our control and some things are not, and that wisdom begins when we stop confusing the two. Worry thrives exactly in that confusion. It spends endless energy trying to manage what cannot be managed: other people's reactions, future events, chance, timing, loss. And while your mind is busy wrestling with the uncontrollable, the only thing you truly own, your inner state, goes neglected. This is where the shift begins. Not with positive thinking, not with denial, but with clarity. The realization that worry is not protecting you. It is exhausting you. It is not preparing you for life. It is pulling you away from it. When you stop treating worry as a necessary tool and start seeing it as a habit, something opens. Habits can be changed. Patterns can be interrupted. The Stoics believed character is shaped by repeated choices, not by sudden insight. Peace works the same way. Your mind is powerful, but it is not a fortune teller. It creates vivid images of the future and presents them with confidence, as if they were facts. Failure, rejection, loss, played on repeat with cinematic detail. Yet, when you look back honestly, how often did life unfold the way your fear predicted? Rarely. And even when difficult things did happen, you were not as helpless as your mind insisted you would be. You adapted, you endured, you learned. Jung observed that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. In the same way, one of the greatest burdens an adult carries is the unlived future they are constantly rehearsing instead of living. The Stoics did not argue that the future doesn't matter. They argued that living in it does damage. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to confine his attention to the present, not because tomorrow is irrelevant, but because tomorrow is unreachable. Worry lives in a time that does not exist yet. Peace lives where your feet are. When you return to the present moment, even briefly, you often discover something surprising. Right now is manageable. Right now, you are breathing. Right now, you are alive. Right now, you are not being crushed by the catastrophe your mind keeps rehearsing. This return to the present is not an escape from responsibility. It is the foundation of wise action. A calm mind sees clearly. A panicked mind reacts blindly. The Stoics valued reason not because it was cold, but because it was steady. They understood that clarity disappears when fear takes over. Modern psychology agrees. A nervous system stuck in fight or flight cannot access creativity, perspective, or nuance. Worry narrows your vision until all you can see is threat. There is also something subtle that happens when you worry constantly. You begin to distrust life itself. You move as if the world is hostile, unpredictable, waiting to harm you. That posture leaks into relationships, work, and self-image. You grip tightly, you over-explain, you over-prepare, you try to force outcomes. Seneca warned that fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. When you resist everything, life becomes a struggle. When you cooperate with reality, life becomes lighter, not easier, but lighter. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings. Stoicism never taught indifference. It taught intelligent engagement. You do your part fully, you show up, you act with integrity, and then you release the outcome. You allow life to respond in its own way. This shift from controlling results to controlling effort changes everything. Anxiety loses its fuel when outcomes are no longer the measure of your worth. Over time, something else becomes clear. Many problems shrink when they stop receiving constant attention. Worry feeds problems by keeping them alive in the mind long after they need to be there. Marcus Aurelius observed that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your judgment about it. When you replay a problem endlessly, you keep it emotionally present even when nothing new is happening. You turn a moment into a permanent state. When you step back, one of three things usually happens. The situation resolves on its own. A solution appears once the mind quiets enough to see it, or you realize the issue was never as serious as you believed. Worry often magnifies shadows until they look solid. Calm reveals what is actually there. Your body understands this before your thoughts do. Tension, shallow breathing, tightness in the chest. These are not random, they are signals. The body reacts to imagined danger the same way it reacts to real danger. When worry becomes constant, your body lives in a permanent emergency. Jung spoke often about the wisdom of the body, warning that ignoring it leads to neurosis. The Stoics, too, believed the body and mind were not separate systems but parts of the same whole. Listening to your body does not mean surrendering to fear. It means noticing when you are overriding yourself. When something consistently creates contraction, physically, emotionally, it is worth paying attention. Calm decisions feel different from anxious ones. Even when a calm choice is difficult, there is a sense of alignment beneath the discomfort. When you stop worrying long enough to feel that difference, decision-making becomes clearer. At some point, you may notice that worry feels automatic. That is because it is. Neural pathways strengthen with use. The more you rehearse fear, the faster your mind travels that road. This is not a personal failure, it is biology. And biology can change. Neuroplasticity confirms what Stoics intuited centuries ago. The mind reshapes itself through practice. Each time you interrupt a worry loop and choose a steadier thought, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen a new one. This is why Stoicism emphasizes daily practice. Not grand gestures, small repetitions, catching one exaggerated thought, pausing one reaction, choosing one calmer response. Over time, peace stops feeling forced and starts feeling natural. Worry loses its authority when it is no longer obeyed automatically. Focus plays a quiet but powerful role here. What you attend to grows in your experience. The Stoics understood attention as a form of discipline. Modern psychology explains it through cognitive filters. When your focus is locked on threat, your mind finds more reasons to feel unsafe. When your focus widens to include stability, progress, and support, your internal world changes. Not because reality changed, but because you are finally seeing more of it. This does not mean ignoring problems. It means placing them in proportion. A problem is part of your life, not the definition of it. When you stop scanning constantly for what could go wrong, you notice what is already working. You notice your resilience. You notice moments of ease. You notice that not everything is urgent. Gradually, the present moment begins to feel like a place you can live in, not just survive. The Stoics return to this idea relentlessly because it works. The present is where action happens. It is where character is formed. It is where peace is possible. Worry pulls you into imaginary futures. Presence brings you back to reality. And in reality, something important becomes undeniable. You are stronger than you think. Worry convinces you that the next challenge will be the one that breaks you. But your life tells a different story. You have survived loss, confusion, disappointment, and fear before. Not because you were fearless, but because you were resilient. Epictetus reminded his students that hardship reveals character rather than destroys it. Each difficulty you lived through added depth, not damage. When you trust your strength, you stop demanding guarantees from life. You move forward without needing certainty. This is freedom. You no longer delay living until fear disappears. You act alongside it, calmly, without letting it rule you. Eventually, a deeper trust emerges. Not blind optimism, but grounded confidence. a sense that life is not conspiring against you, that setbacks are not punishments, that delays may be redirections. The Stoics called this alignment with nature, with the larger order of things. Marcus Aurelius believed that everything fits into a greater pattern, even when the pattern is not yet visible. When you stop worrying, you start noticing how often things unfold in ways your fear could never predict. Missed opportunities lead to better ones. Endings create space. Obstacles refine you. This does not make pain pleasant, but it makes it meaningful. Jung wrote that meaning is what transforms suffering into something bearable. Stoicism offers that meaning through acceptance and purpose. At this point, worry no longer feels like a necessity. It feels like an old habit you have outgrown. You still plan, you still care, but you no longer sacrifice your peace to imaginary futures. You meet life with steadiness instead of resistance. This is how everything starts working out, not because life becomes perfect, but because you stop fighting it at every turn. You stop draining yourself with constant fear. You show up clearer, calmer, and more capable. You live where your power actually is. And if this way of seeing life resonates with you, if you feel something in you soften or steady, then staying connected to this philosophy matters. Subscribing is not about following a channel. It is about choosing to keep returning to ideas that strengthen your inner life. It is a quiet commitment to growth, clarity, and self-mastery. A reminder that you don't have to carry unnecessary weight, that peace is a practice, and that you are capable of living with far more calm than you were ever taught to believe. And as that understanding settles in, something else begins to change quietly beneath the surface. You start to notice how often worry was never about the situation itself, but about identity, about who you thought you had to be in order to survive, the one who anticipates everything, the one who never relaxes, the one who stays alert, prepared, guarded. For a long time, worry felt like responsibility, like proof that you were serious about life. But slowly, you realize it was also a form of self-mistrust. A belief that if you loosened your grip, everything would fall apart. The Stoics would say this belief is the real source of suffering. Not the event, not the uncertainty, but the story you tell yourself about what would happen if you stopped bracing. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself again and again that nothing truly valuable can be taken from a person who governs their inner life. And yet most people live as if peace is fragile, as if calm is something that must be earned only after everything goes right. This belief keeps you trapped, because everything going right is a future that never fully arrives. What begins to emerge instead is a different kind of strength, not the tense, clenched strength of control, but the grounded strength of trust. Trust does not mean expecting good things to happen. It means knowing that whatever happens, you will meet it with clarity rather than panic. Carl Jung once said that the acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. When you stop worrying compulsively, you are practicing that acceptance. You are saying, I trust myself enough to face reality as it is. This trust changes how you move through daily life. You listen more carefully. You speak more slowly. You respond instead of react. You no longer rush to fill silence or fix every discomfort. You notice that many things resolve themselves when you stop interfering with fear. Conversations soften. Conflicts lose intensity. Decisions become simpler, not because they are easy, but because you are no longer trying to solve 10 imaginary problems at once. There is also a subtle shift in how you relate to time. Worry fractures time. It pulls pieces of tomorrow into today and leaves you exhausted before anything has actually happened. When you stop worrying, time begins to feel whole again. The present moment regains its shape. You can give attention fully instead of partially. You notice details you used to miss. The warmth of light, the steadiness of your breath, the simple fact of being alive without needing to justify it. The Stoics understood this as alignment with nature, not nature as scenery, but nature as reality unfolding according to its own order. Fighting that order creates friction. Cooperating with it creates flow. Seneca warned that a person who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. When you stop pre-living pain, you recover an enormous amount of energy. That energy does not disappear. It returns to you as focus, creativity, and resilience. At this stage, worry no longer feels urgent. It feels familiar, like an old habit knocking on the door. Sometimes it still shows up. Stoicism never promised permanent calm. What changes is your relationship to it. You recognize worry as a signal, not a command. You acknowledge it without surrendering to it. You let it pass without building your life around it. This is mastery, not domination, but understanding. You also begin to see how worry once shaped your self-image, how it made you doubt your worth when outcomes were uncertain, how it tied your sense of safety to external validation. When that loosens, confidence becomes quieter and deeper. You no longer need constant reassurance. You stop explaining yourself so much. You feel less compelled to prove anything. Your presence alone feels sufficient. Carl Jung spoke about individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are rather than who you were conditioned to be. Letting go of worry is part of that process. It strips away false responsibilities. It exposes the difference between what matters and what merely feels urgent. You begin to act from values instead of fear, from character instead of compulsion. This does not mean life stops challenging you. It means challenges no longer define you. When difficulty arises, you meet it directly without layering it with catastrophic imagination. You take the next clear step, then the next. You trust that clarity emerges through action, not rumination. The Stoics believed that virtue reveals itself through behavior under pressure, not through avoidance of pressure. Calm does not come from hiding. It comes from engagement without panic. As this way of being deepens, something unexpected happens. People respond differently to you, not because you changed them, but because you changed the energy you bring. Calm invites honesty. Stability invites trust. When you stop carrying fear into every interaction, relationships breathe. You listen instead of anticipating rejection. You speak truthfully without aggression. You walk away from what does not align without bitterness. Even solitude changes. When you are no longer at war with your thoughts, being alone feels spacious instead of heavy. Silence becomes restorative rather than threatening. You stop distracting yourself constantly. You can sit with yourself without needing escape. This is a quiet milestone. It means you are no longer afraid of your own inner life. The Stoics placed enormous value on this inner freedom. Epictetus taught that freedom is not the absence of obstacles, but the ability to remain undisturbed by them. Worry is disturbance rehearsed in advance. When you release it, you reclaim freedom in small, everyday moments. Waiting no longer feels like wasted time. Uncertainty no longer feels like punishment. Life becomes less of a test and more of a practice. Gradually, your sense of direction clarifies. You no longer chase every possibility out of fear of missing out. You choose more deliberately. You say no more often. You conserve energy. You respect your limits. This is not withdrawal from life. It is refinement. Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Worry was part of that darkness. Seeing it clearly allows you to move beyond it. There is also grief in this process. Grief for the years spent anxious, for the peace you postponed, for the moments you were present physically but absent mentally. This grief is natural. It is not regret. It is recognition. And like all honest recognition, it opens the door to compassion for yourself and for others who are still trapped in the same cycle. At some point, the idea that life is working out takes on a new meaning. It no longer means getting everything you want. It means becoming someone who can handle what comes, someone who remains steady in uncertainty, someone who trusts the process without needing to see the whole map. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the universe is change and life is opinion. When you stop confusing the two, peace becomes possible. You start to see that many things you feared were simply teachers. Delays taught patience, loss taught depth, uncertainty taught humility. None of these lessons could have been learned through control alone. They required surrender, not surrender to fate, but surrender of illusion. The illusion that you could think your way into safety. And so the story continues, not with a dramatic ending, but with a quieter beginning. A life lived with less noise, less internal resistance, more presence, more trust. You still plan, you still strive, but you no longer sacrifice the present to protect an imagined future. This is how everything begins to work out. Not because life suddenly obeys you, but because you stop fighting what cannot be controlled and focus fully on what can: your character, your attention, your response, your values. If you've stayed with this reflection, it's because something in you already knows this truth. You are not broken, you are simply overburdened. Peace was never missing. It was waiting for you to stop looking for it in places it could never be found. And choosing to return to these ideas again and again is not passive. It is an act of discipline, a daily alignment with clarity over fear. This is why staying connected to Stoic thought matters, not as inspiration but as practice, as a steady compass when life feels uncertain. Subscribing, in that sense, is not about following a voice. It is about reminding yourself of your own. A quiet commitment to live with intention, resilience, and inner order, to keep choosing calm where panic once lived, to keep laying down unnecessary weight. And as the path deepens, you begin to notice something subtle but profound. The way you experience life is no longer dominated by anticipation. You are no longer constantly leaning forward into what might happen next. Instead, you start inhabiting your own life again. The present moment stops feeling like a waiting room and starts feeling like a place where something meaningful is already happening. This shift is quiet, almost easy to miss, but it changes everything. Before, your attention was scattered. Part of you was always elsewhere, planning, worrying, rehearsing, bracing. Now, your attention gathers itself. It becomes steadier, more intentional. You begin to realize that attention is one of the most valuable things you possess, and worry was spending it recklessly. The Stoics treated attention as sacred. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to guard his mind carefully, because whatever he allowed to enter it would shape his character. When you stop feeding worry, you reclaim your attention, and with it, your sense of agency. This reclamation brings clarity. You see situations more cleanly, without the fog of imagined consequences. Decisions feel less overwhelming because they are no longer burdened with the impossible task of guaranteeing the future. You choose based on values rather than fear. You act based on what is right, not what feels safest. This is the Stoic ideal in practice. Living in accordance with reason, guided by virtue rather than anxiety. You may also begin to notice that your emotional reactions soften. Things that once triggered spirals now register as information. Disappointment still arises, but it does not define the entire day. Criticism still stings, but it no longer shatters your sense of self. Uncertainty still exists, but it no longer feels like a threat to your survival. This is not numbness, it is emotional maturity. It is the difference between being ruled by emotion and being informed by it. Carl Jung believed that maturity comes when the ego learns its proper place, not abolished, but no longer in command of everything. Worry is often the ego trying desperately to protect itself from humiliation, loss, or pain. When you stop obeying worry, the ego relaxes. It realizes it does not have to control every outcome to remain whole. This relaxation allows a deeper intelligence to emerge, one rooted in experience rather than fear. With this shift, you begin to trust your own timing. You stop rushing decisions just to escape discomfort. You stop forcing clarity before it is ready to appear. You understand that some answers arrive only after patience has been practiced. Seneca wrote that nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. When worry steps aside, you start to feel this rhythm in your own life. You move when it is time to move. You rest when it is time to rest. You wait without panic. Waiting used to feel unbearable because it gave your mind too much space to imagine disaster. Now, waiting becomes neutral, sometimes even peaceful. You no longer interpret delay as danger. You see it as part of the unfolding process. This alone removes a tremendous amount of suffering. So much anxiety comes from the belief that if things are not happening now, something is wrong. Letting go of that belief restores balance. Another change quietly takes root. Your relationship with failure evolves. When worry dominated, failure felt catastrophic. It was proof that your fears were justified, proof that you should have worried more, prepared more, controlled more. But without that lens, failure becomes feedback, information, a moment in a longer journey rather than a final verdict. Epictetus taught that no one is harmed unless they choose to be harmed by their judgments. When failure is no longer fused with identity, it loses its power to define you. This new relationship with failure encourages courage. You try things you once avoided. You speak when you once stayed silent. You step forward without needing guarantees. Not recklessly, but honestly. You accept that uncertainty is part of growth, not a sign that something has gone wrong. Jung observed that the greatest risk is not living your life fully. Letting go of worry removes one of the biggest barriers to that fullness. You may notice, too, that your sense of self becomes less fragile. You stop measuring your worth by external approval or outcomes. Praise feels pleasant, but not necessary. Criticism feels uncomfortable, but not devastating. Your center of gravity moves inward. The Stoics called this inner citadel, the part of you that remains steady regardless of external chaos. When worry ruled, that citadel was constantly under siege. Now it is fortified by perspective. As this inner steadiness grows, compassion often follows, not only for yourself, but for others. You recognize worry in other people, the tension, the overreaction, the defensiveness, and instead of taking it personally, you see it as fear looking for safety. This understanding softens your responses. You don't absorb other people's anxiety as easily. You set boundaries without guilt. You remain kind without self-abandonment. This balance between firmness and compassion is another hallmark of Stoic wisdom. Marcus Aurelius urged himself to be tolerant with others and strict with himself, not in punishment, but in discipline. When worry fades, discipline becomes easier because it is no longer fueled by fear. You take care of your body because you respect it. You manage your time because you value it. You choose your thoughts because you understand their impact. There is also a noticeable shift in how you experience pleasure. When worry dominated, pleasure was often shadowed by fear of loss. Even good moments felt temporary and fragile. Now, enjoyment becomes more complete because it is no longer rushed or guarded. You allow yourself to be present without immediately imagining the end. This does not make pleasure clingy, it makes it honest. You enjoy without grasping. You appreciate without fear. The Stoics believed that true enjoyment comes from moderation and presence, not excess or escape. When you stop worrying, you no longer need pleasure to distract you from your thoughts. You can enjoy simple things fully because your mind is not elsewhere. A conversation, a walk, a quiet moment. These experiences regain their depth. Over time, this way of living begins to feel natural, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer exhausting yourself by fighting reality. You accept that discomfort is part of being alive, but suffering is optional. Worry was adding layers of suffering that were never required. Removing it does not make you immune to pain, but it makes pain cleaner, shorter, more honest. You also begin to notice how much energy you now have. Mental energy, emotional energy, creative energy. Worry was draining these reserves constantly. Without it, you feel more capable, more alive. You engage with life rather than bracing against it. This engagement brings meaning, not because everything is meaningful, but because you are fully present for what is. Jung wrote that meaning makes a great many things endurable, perhaps everything. Stoicism does not promise happiness in the shallow sense. It offers meaning through alignment with reality, reason, and virtue. When you stop worrying, you make space for that meaning to emerge. You stop asking life to guarantee comfort and start asking yourself to live well regardless of circumstances. At this stage, trust in life becomes less of an idea and more of an experience. You have evidence now. You have seen that you can face uncertainty without collapsing. You have felt calm where panic used to live. You have made decisions without perfect clarity and survived. This evidence matters. It weakens the old narrative that worry was necessary. You still plan for the future, but planning feels different. It is strategic, not anxious, flexible, not rigid. You understand that plans are tools, not contracts. You adjust them as reality unfolds. You no longer interpret change as failure. You see it as responsiveness. Seneca warned against clinging to fixed expectations because life delights in disrupting them. When you accept this, disruption loses its sting. Slowly, the idea that everything starts working out becomes grounded rather than magical. It does not mean every desire is fulfilled. It means life feels workable, manageable, coherent. You trust that you can meet whatever comes with steadiness. This trust changes how you wake up in the morning and how you lie down at night. Your mind is quieter, your body is less tense, your sleep deepens. You begin to understand that peace is not something you reach once and keep forever. It is something you return to again and again through practice. Each moment offers a choice: spiral or steady, react or respond, resist or accept. The Stoics did not expect perfection. They expected effort, consistency, willingness. And that willingness to keep returning to clarity is what truly changes a life. It is not dramatic, it is daily. It shows up in how you speak to yourself when things go wrong, in how quickly you release what you cannot change, in how gently you treat your own mistakes. Over time, these small acts of wisdom compound into a fundamentally different way of being. You are no longer living in constant defense mode. You are living in alignment with yourself, with reality, with the present moment. This alignment brings a quiet confidence that does not need to announce itself. You simply feel grounded. And from this grounding, life does not feel like a series of threats to survive. It feels like a process to participate in. You are no longer trying to outrun uncertainty. You are walking with it. This is where Stoicism ultimately leads, not to detachment from life, but to deeper engagement with it. Free from unnecessary fear, free from mental noise, free from the belief that you must control everything to be safe. And if you continue walking this path, returning to these ideas when worry tries to reclaim its place, you reinforce something essential. You are capable of living with calm in an uncertain world. You are capable of choosing clarity over chaos. You are capable of trusting yourself. Over time, you may notice that even silence feels different. Silence used to invite anxious thought. Now it invites presence. You can sit without distraction, walk without stimulation, rest without guilt. This is not laziness, it is restoration. Seneca warned that constant busyness is another form of mental disorder. When you stop worrying, you stop fleeing stillness. You discover that stillness is where clarity regenerates. Clarity, once regained, has a momentum of its own. You begin to sense when something is out of alignment before it becomes a crisis. You listen sooner, you adjust earlier, you course-correct gently instead of waiting for collapse. This is one of the hidden benefits of calm. It makes life easier not by removing challenges, but by helping you respond before they escalate. As this continues, the question of meaning inevitably arises. Without constant worry to distract you, you may feel a pull toward deeper purpose. What am I actually doing with my time? What am I cultivating? Who am I becoming? These questions are not meant to overwhelm you. They arise naturally when the noise quiets. Jung believed that meaning is not something invented, but something discovered through honest engagement with life. As the Stoics understood, progress is not measured by the absence of struggle, but by the quality of your response to it. When worry no longer dictates that response, your life begins to feel steadier, clearer, and more your own. This is not an ending. It is a continuation, a deepening commitment to live from clarity rather than fear, to trust yourself enough to face reality without rehearsing disaster, to meet life as it is, with open eyes and a steady heart. And that is how things truly begin to work out, not because life becomes predictable, but because you become grounded. And you step away from this moment. Remember this: nothing outside of you needs to change for peace to begin. The moment you stop fighting your own mind, life stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a path you can walk with steadiness and trust. You don't need to have everything figured out. You only need to meet what's in front of you with clarity, courage, and calm. That is enough. It has always been enough. If this reflection stayed with you, don't let it end here. One of the videos on your screen continues this journey. Deeper insights, steadier grounding, and practical wisdom you can carry into your daily life. Let it guide you a little further. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing presence over panic and wisdom over noise. Thank you for being a part of Psychresto Mind.